we've got to make a mention of this whole ongoing situation on First Take between Kendrick Perkins and JJ Redick and the narrative of the MVP award as of late being awarded due to, I guess, what Perk was trying to say, the ethnicity of the player. And there were comments made and, analysis made back and forth to where both men got heated, but we're losing sight of the topic, which is the overall award, which is the MVP, and why players get it. So again, we are going to prevy away from the narrative that Perk was going on and remind everybody that this conversation is well beyond anything that he was mentioning, which is why JJ's accurate in saying false narratives are irrelevant because Nikola Jokic is playing at such a high, efficient, and consistent level. So, Kyle, to kick this one to you, with this ongoing situation between both of these personalities on First Take, what are your thoughts on Nikola Jokic potentially being a 3-time MVP?
Well, I think that Jokic definitely deserves the opportunity to get a third straight MVP. And, when it comes to the argument that both JJ Redick and Kendrick Perkins had on First Take, I think that the response that JJ Redick gave to Kendrick's assertion that the reason why Jokic is getting all these praises or getting all these votes is because Kendrick was thinking that 80% of the voters for the MVP race are white. I think JJ was right to respond where this is not a narrative that fits with reality. And JJ, I think, appropriately made a good reaction to Kendrick's assertion, which I don't believe that Kendrick made the right assertion to make in that discussion. And I don't think the way that Kendrick went about it was the right pathway forward when you devolve the whole argument to purely race. Because when Kevin and I have talked about Nikola Jokic in regards to the MVP discussion, it's never been because, oh my God, he's white. First of all, that would be racist. We're judging his status in the MVP race based on what he does. Because let's face it, Jokic is one of the most fundamental pieces to revolutionizing the center position in this generation of the NBA. When you watch Jokic game in and game out, who facilitates and who has a bigger impact on the offense in the manner that he does it in that you've seen in NBA history? It's very hard to find somebody like Jokic who can go out there and drop you 25 points, get 10 to 15 rebounds a game, and facilitate like a point guard and put up 8 to 9, potentially 10 plus assists a game. That's why Jokic has won the last 2 MVPs in a row. That's why he could potentially win a third straight MVP. It has nothing to do with his race, like Kendrick was essentially trying to say in that segment where JJ responded against him. It's simply just because Jokic is a phenomenal basketball player. And he definitely deserves and garners respect because of that. And when it comes to other players that are vying for the MVP this year, Giannis is in that discussion. Joel Embiid is in that discussion. You could even say Embiid should even be higher than Jokic because in the one-on-one battle between Jokic and Embiid smoked him. And that is definitely a point that you can make in favor of Embiid. But Jokic, when it comes to his overall play, I think if there are people saying that Jokic doesn't deserve a third straight MVP, they're not watching him. He is a phenomenal basketball player. We watch the highlights of Jokic basically every game, and the impact that he has on the Denver Nuggets is extremely critical to their own success. Now, the one point that I will make about Jokic is, if he wins a third straight MVP and the Nuggets don't make it to the Western Conference Finals or the NBA Finals this year, there may be a segment of NBA fans who will look at Jokic getting a third straight MVP and they may feel a little bit weird about that. They may feel like he does great in the regular season, but when it comes to the postseason, does he impact Denver enough to get them into a position to where they can be in contention for an NBA Finals? I understand that injuries with Denver has been a big issue the last couple years. A couple years ago, they got swept by the Suns. Last year, they lost to the Warriors. But this is their year as far as I see it. The Denver's one of the best teams in the NBA, and they have a very good chance to make a very good run into the playoffs this year, where an NBA Finals is a possibility. But if Jokic doesn't play up to his standard in the playoffs, then I think people can rightly criticize Jokic for not impacting the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs to the point where an MVP should be. Because had LeBron won MVPs 3 straight years in a row, and he never made an NBA Finals or an Eastern Conference Finals appearance in that hypothetical stretch, people would be crucifying him. And if Jokic doesn't get the Nuggets into that situation, in that hypothetical that I laid out with LeBron, then I think that Jokic would be open to some legitimate criticism. But as of right now, Jokic deserves to be in the MVP discussion. And I disagree wholeheartedly with what Kendrick said. And I think what JJ said on First Take was accurate in response to what Kendrick said. So overall, when it comes to Jokic and his status in the MVP race, I think he definitely deserves to be in it. Not because he's white. It's because he is a great basketball player and he displays it night in and night out. And honestly, I have nothing more to say to this.
I mean, I'm not really going to repeat anything that Kyle said. We're in full agreement, as per usual, when it comes to topics like this. This has nothing to do with ethnicity. This has nothing to do with race or the voters. When you're playing at the level that you're playing at, when Jokic is playing at that MVP level 3 consecutive years at the center position with the numbers he's putting up consistently, like I said, night in and night out, that conversation is going to be had no matter what Kendrick Perkins or JJ Redick thinks. There's nothing that any NBA personality or NBA media star that's covering the league is going to have to say, because they're not on the court. They couldn't stop Jokic. They can't stop Jokic. If Kendrick Perkins was on the court, there's no stopping him. Kendrick Perkins was a bum outside of the 2008 championship year where he was a force at getting rebounds, blocking shots, and being a presence. But I don't want to give any more feedback to the 2008 Celtics because we got to hear about it every other week of how good they were. So that's as much credit as I'm going to give him. In regards to Nikola Jokic and this award, it is rightfully justified, again, because he's putting up the numbers that he's putting up. Now, the only thing I will disagree to my partner's point is Nikola Jokic is damn near averaging 30 points per game in the playoffs year in and year out. And I mean, he's doing it at an efficient clip. There was another podcast that I was listening to, and they pulled up Nikola Jokic's stats throughout each and every playoff series he's played against in the last few years. And when you go back to 2020, they lost to the eventual champion Los Angeles Lakers, but they did have Jamal Murray, who was going off week in and week out. Then you got to go and talk about the year after that. They lost to Phoenix, the eventual Western Conference champions. Then the year after that, which was last season, they lost to the Warriors, the eventual champions. They're not losing in the first round to 8 seeds. They're not losing in the first round to scrubs. They're going out and they're playing the best that they can and losing to the eventual either conference or NBA champions. And you have to preview as well, Jamal Murray ended up tearing his ACL later in that postseason against the Lakers. You also have to remember that Michael Porter Jr. has been in and out of the lineup, and he's been injured. Jamal Murray didn't come back until this year. So Nikola Jokic's best player over the last 2 seasons, you can make the argument, has been Aaron Gordon, who isn't exactly known for scoring. He's known for dunk contests. And let's be realistic. Nikola Jokic hasn't played with an all-star at his side his entire career, whereas people that have won this award are playing with multiple-time all-stars, are playing with all NBA players. Obviously, Giannis Antetokounmpo being a back-to-back MVP in 2019, 2020, whenever that was. Giannis was playing with Chris Middleton, who had made multiple all-star appearances. So, you know what I'm saying? There is narratives and levels to this conversation as well. But to say that Nikola isn't performing in the postseason is I would say an incorrect statement, because it's not his fault. If he was underperforming, if he was scoring like 12 points, 4 turnovers a game, 10 rebounds, and maybe like 5 assists, that would be like, all right, he's falling apart in the playoffs. He's not doing what James Harden does, and he's not disappearing in the playoffs. He just has no help. People have to remember, yes, you're an MVP. Yes, you're one of the best players in the world, but it is a team sport. He can't go out there and score 50 to 60 points a night by himself with 20 rebounds and 20 assists. You need to have contributing help, and you also do have to come out of the game in certain instances for rest. Nikola Jokic does everything he can do, and without help over the last few years, he has done the best that he can. And I know that that's saying a lot because we hold athletes to such a high standard, because ego, cockiness, I mean, the bravado that they have on the court, oh, I'm the greatest that's ever lived. Jokic doesn't give a shit about these stats. He doesn't care about these MVP awards. He wants to win. And the record that he has whenever he does have a triple double, I think they're 29-0 or 30-0 in the last few seasons. So Perk coming out and saying that stat padding, I don't necessarily think so because again, they're undefeated every single game he has a triple double over the last couple of seasons. So that is another narrative that Kendrick Perkins has to get kicked out for because it's ridiculous and blasphemous. I will agree with Kyle though. Now that they're fully healthy, the Nuggets are fully loaded. They're the number 1 seed in the Western Conference as of today. If they continue that and the playoffs on the Western Conference side run through Denver and they get eliminated in the first or second round, that will then, I agree, he'll be looked upon differently because there's going to be no excuse. You can't say you don't have home court. You can't say you don't have your all-star or, your second and third best players in Michael Porter and Jamal Murray. They're here, and the Nuggets are playing well. So now this narrative will be, I would believe, a little bit more magnified because he's got his help. And I agree with Kyle. If they fall short of a Western Conference Finals appearance or even a Finals appearance, that third award is going to look a little suspect, even though we all know that award is granted after the regular season, but it is a regular season award. It's going to look a little weird if you win 3 in a row, but you can't get past the second round. So kudos to Jokic for how good he's been playing. I do acknowledge, again, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jason Tatum, Joel Embiid, and how good they're playing. But when you're doing what Nikola is doing this consistently at his size, there's not really much of an argument you can make.